Hey guys, tonight we're sneaking into a room draped in red velvet, where candles flicker but can't quite cover the strange scent in the air. You're standing in the bedchamber of Queen Elizabeth I, the woman who once ruled an empire, the one every king wanted to marry, yet carried a rotting secret down to her very bones. No one dared ask why she coughed up blood, because who would question a queen in brocade, wearing a crown, speaking with all the pride of England? But behind the velvet curtains was a truth no powder or rouge could hide forever. And don't worry, if you start feeling faint when we get to the part where her teeth turned a dark bluish purple, or her lips smelled of mercury, well, you wouldn't be the first. Tonight's story is a little haunting, but gentle enough to lull you to sleep without making you run from the palace in your dreams. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, drop a comment letting me know what country you're in and what time it is. I always love seeing the listener map light up like a fairy tale kingdom. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Her bed was no longer a place for rest. It was a stage to preserve the final image of a queen who never wanted to be seen, weak. Picture it. London at the end of winter. The cold slithering through cracks in the windows like a snake, seeping into the velvet curtains and the bed sheets. But the queen only covered herself with a thin layer of fabric, not because she didn't feel the cold, but because she couldn't bear the weight. Not just the weight of the blankets, but the weight of the throne itself, dissolving with each breath. You know, in her final years, Elizabeth was rarely seen in public anymore. No more thunderous speeches. No more fiery eyes staring down a cabinet full of men. From a symbol of power, she faded into a shadow within her own palace. And here's a small detail most people miss. Elizabeth started refusing all mirrors in the palace. She didn't want to look anymore. Not because she couldn't bear her aging face, but because she knew if she looked, she'd see the person she had killed her younger self. One day, a lady-in-waiting dared to place a small mirror on the dressing table, hoping the queen might smile at herself one last time. The result? The mirror was thrown to the ground, shattered, like the rotting pride of an empire built on hollow promises and white powder thick as grave lime. Yeah, sounds a bit tragic. Huh? But wait, don't feel too sorry for her just yet. This was the woman who ordered the execution of her half-sister, had her ex-lover beheaded, and still managed to wear a bright yellow gown on her garden stroll the next day. If you've ever ghosted someone in your inbox and felt guilty, Elizabeth would have scoffed at you. As for her health, old records describe swollen jaws, patchy hair loss, and signs of partial facial paralysis. Maybe you're thinking, well, old people get like that. But this was the woman who once led her troops on horseback, who once convinced a whole nation she didn't need a man to rule. And now, even a gum infection left her unable to swallow porridge. Historians still debate the exact cause of her death. Some suspect mercury poisoning due to handmade cosmetics of the time, which, yes, contained actual mercury. Others believe she died of loneliness, so profound it wore the body down. Not heart disease, but a tired heart, slowly, like an old wooden clock that hasn't been wound tick, tock, and stop. Another strange thing, though she was too weak to sit up, Elizabeth refused to lie down until her final hours. She stood well, slumped on cushions, head swaying, eyes dull, but determined not to let anyone see her lying like the dying. She held her stance like the last soldier on the battlement, And when she collapsed, no one heard a sound. Imagine being one of the maids in that room. The silence so deep, you could hear the candle wax dripping. You hold your breath, not knowing whether to call the doctor or keep pretending she was still alive, because you feared the moment you confirmed it, everything would collapse. If you're feeling creeped out, don't worry. This is only the beginning. There's plenty more delightfully fragrant moments ahead. And by fragrant, I mean historical musk, not perfume. Oh, by the way, has anyone ever told you real history is scarier than horror stories? So the Queen was gone, but don't expect a royal funeral dripping in gold and television drama grandeur. Because the very first thing they did when Elizabeth took her last breath was seal every window shut and stuff all gaps with vinegar-soaked linen. Not to keep the draft out, but to keep the smell in. Just imagine a body that just stopped functioning inside a hot, stuffy room in the middle of London's spring, with candles burning day and night, and no preservation technology. Servants later recalled that the coffin was hastily built and sealed shut before the official ceremony even took place. No one saw the Queen's body. No final portrait. No ceremonial washing of the dead. Just a black wooden box, sealed tight, as if to whisper, what's inside is best left unknown. Oh boo. Truth is, historians still argue about the condition of Elizabeth's body at the time of her death. Some believe her internal organs had already decayed from lung disease or jaw cancer. Others suggest a more shocking theory, that decomposition had already begun while she was still alive, due to prolonged mercury poisoning from the white powder she used daily to cover the pockmarks from smallpox. You might ask, wait, didn't they know mercury was toxic? Oh, they did. But just like you know fast food is bad and still eat it when you're stressed, Queens also powdered up during depression. When the soul feels rotten, people paint the outside, so no one can see what's decaying within. Kind of like social media today. Oh, and then came the day of the state funeral. A long procession crossed London's cobbled streets. The crowd wore black, held candles, their eyes glistening. But don't think all of them were crying from sorrow. Part of it was the strange scent in the air. Old documents discreetly note that the air around the coffin had a sweet but sharp smell, causing slight dizziness. A remarkable account. A few young ladies in waiting, walking beside the coffin, fainted. They claimed it was due to emotion. But an old guard whispered, "What kind of emotion turns everyone pale just from passing by?" And this is when things started to get strange. The coffin trembled slightly as it crossed London Bridge. The pallbearers blamed the uneven road. The superstitious murmured, "Her spirit hasn't left yet." Some townsfolk even bowed their heads and whispered apologies as if they feared she might hear them. You see, even in death, Elizabeth still commanded a crowd. And here's a detail almost no one notices. During the funeral, she was dressed in the same pearl-embellished gown she wore at her coronation. A full circle from throne to tomb, but also a closed circle of solitude, because throughout the entire funeral, no one dared stand beside the coffin for too long. They said she was the Queen of Light. Yet she died in silence. Nah, children. No trusted courtiers. No final kiss goodbye. Only the sound of wheels on stone and the scent of burning incense. Sounds grim, doesn't it? But wait, here's a little joke to lighten the mood. If you've ever had a workday where no one looked you in the eye, don't be sad. The queen of an entire empire died without anyone daring to look at her face. That's peak level loneliness. Still, the question lingers. Did she pass as a symbol or as a ghost no one dared mention? Have you ever stayed awake for 3 nights straight without a single second of sleep? If you have, then condolences. You and Queen Elizabeth have something in common. In her final days, she didn't sleep. Not insomnia from mild stress like us, but the kind where you're wide awake, staring at the ceiling all night, eyes unblinking. Servants recalled, she sat silently in the corner of the room, candlelight casting an eerie glow on her pale skin. And sometimes, she laughed to herself. Not a cheerful laugh, but the kind you hear in films with creepy background music. At times, they heard her whispering the name of her father, King Henry VIII, the man who had her mother beheaded. Worse yet, and she spoke to the dead. The first was Mary Stuart, her cousin and political rival whom she had executed. One night, a maid heard her mumbling, "I'm sorry, Mary, but you weren't innocent either." The second was Robert Dudley, the only love of her life, rumored to have secretly married her. When he died, Elizabeth locked herself in her chamber for days. But in her final days, she claimed to hear his footsteps in the hallway. One night, a young lady in waiting heard the Queen call out, "Rob, don't leave me. I've forgiven you," even though the door was closed. No one went in. No one came out. And this wasn't just dismissed as a senile old woman. Court records confirm the Queen refused to lie down, didn't eat, didn't speak, and just sat there, and her eyes never closed. Imagine that. She had once been the center of Europe, the woman who drove the Pope mad because he couldn't unseat her from the throne. And now, she sat curled up in a corner, talking to air like a ghost in her own palace. Of course, historians are still divided. One side believes she suffered from severe nervous exhaustion, compounded by age-related illness. The other points to end-of-life delirium, common in powerful, isolated individuals who lived in a constant state of vigilance. And some simply believe she really saw them. So, whatever the reason, one thing is clear. Elizabeth didn't want anyone to witness her downfall. When her trusted courtier, the Earl of Nottingham, came to visit, she turned her face to the wall and said nothing, not out of anger, but because she didn't want him to see a face that no longer belonged to a queen. Perhaps she feared that if anyone saw her weakness, everything she had built over 4 decades would vanish. A verified historical detail. In 45 years of reign, Elizabeth never once stepped down from the throne. No previous English monarch had done that. And maybe that's why she couldn't step out of character, even when her soul was tired. If you feel a touch of sympathy by now, that's understandable. But don't forget, she once ordered the execution of 300 priests, banned Catholicism, and ruled the press with an iron fist. This wasn't a Disney princess. This was a woman who declared herself married to England, and her only husband, the throne, was now colder than her pillow. Oh, and just between us, if you've ever found yourself talking to a mirror after 2 a.m., you're not alone. At least you're not claiming to be conversing with your royal father from the 16th century. Or are you? In that case, drink some water, turn off the lights, and try not to overthink. And then, the fated day arrived. You can picture the room. Heavy curtains drawn tight. The only light coming from the flickering glow of a trembling candle. The wind from the Thames no longer strong enough to pierce the cold stone walls. Incense burned constantly, not just to cleanse the air, but to mask something quietly emanating from the lifeless body. Elizabeth didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't close her eyes. She just sat there silent for 4 days, never leaving the silk-cushioned seat, never allowing anyone to help her lie down. When her courtiers pleaded, "Your Majesty, please let us help you rest." No, she only shook her head, gently, as if she feared that if she lay down, she would never rise again. And that's exactly what happened. On the 4th night, she collapsed. Not quite fell, but slowly slipped, like a curtain easing off its rail. Soundless, without resistance. From that moment, the English court entered one of the tensest waiting periods in its history. Because the Queen had not named an official successor. Do you think someone as intelligent as Elizabeth forgot? No, she didn't forget. She deliberately stayed silent. Since her youth, she had declared, "I am a queen. I am not a mother. I am not a wife. I am England." Someone like that wouldn't easily point and say, "This one shall take my place." Because naming a successor meant admitting she was going to die. But England needed a name, needed a figure to inherit the wobbling throne. And as the Queen lay there, eyes dim, lips trembling, one courtier, Robert Cecil, leaned close to her ear and whispered, "James, son of Mary Stuart, do you consent?" She didn't answer right away. She only blinked, once and never again. That blink, according to the records of the time, was interpreted as consent. And so, James VI of Scotland became James VI of England. Here's a little known detail. Immediately after Elizabeth's death, a messenger was dispatched in the night, riding 600 kilometers to Edinburgh, where James was staying. He rode through forests, over hills, changing horses constantly, spending nearly 3 days and nights without sleep, just to say one sentence: "The Queen is dead. Long live the King." And you might not know, the speed of that message wasn't just about loyalty, it was to prevent a coup. Because when the throne is empty, any noble could rise. And with royal English history not lacking in casual usurpations, you can understand the urgency. Still, modern historians remain divided. Did Elizabeth truly consent to James's succession? Or was it the court's decision, using a dying woman's blink to legitimize their power? To this day, no one knows for sure. Some theories suggest she meant to pass the crown to someone else, perhaps a trusted courtier, or even a noblewoman, but lacked the strength to say it, and was overruled. Others think she intentionally left it open, as one last test of the kingdom's fate. A queen who, even in her final breath, refused to be controlled, not even by death. And in the end, when all was done, preparations for the funeral garments began. It was one of the most sacred yet sorrowful moments in royal history. The maids who had served her for 40 years were tasked with dressing a cold body, which they were not allowed to look at directly. They had to wear veils, work in silence, and place around her neck a ruby necklace believed to be the same one she wore at her first dance with Robert Dudley. Just imagine, in a vast empire, all it took was a glance, a necklace, and a final whisper to determine the fate of an entire nation. If you're lying in bed listening, eyes half closed, thinking, being queen must be exhausting, then yes, being queen is hard. But dying as a queen is even harder. You think everything ended peacefully when Queen Elizabeth was buried in Westminster Abbey? Oh, not quite. In fact, it may have been the moment the coffin was sealed that the real story of Elizabeth truly began. but not her story, the one others wrote about her. A version 2. Zero of the Queen. Polished more carefully than the coronation gown she once wore. After Elizabeth's death, the court faced a dilemma. How do you make the people love and remember a queen who left no children, no husband, no official heir, and had executed her own kin? The answer was simple. Rewrite her. Not through lies, but through curation. Remove a few things, add some sparkle, and thus, the Virgin Queen was born not from flesh and blood, but from reprinted history books, retouched portrait, and commissioned poems. One of the strangest details, Elizabeth's body wasn't buried immediately. According to records, she was kept at Whitehall Palace for nearly 6 weeks before her official funeral. 6 weeks. Almost 2 months. They said it was to prepare a grand state ceremony. But rumors claimed they needed time to perfect her legacy. A historian once wrote, "No one controls public memory faster than those who survive a monarch." You see, Elizabeth spent her whole life maintaining her image of strength, but it was in death that image became immortal. From that point on, you'd see portraits of Elizabeth looking younger than she ever was. Smooth white skin, sharp eyes, not a wrinkle in sight. No mention of missing teeth. No black spots on her hands from illness. All lightly retouched. Just like TikTok filters today, except back then, they had royal painters. And from here, they began calling her names like Torch of England, the Light of the Realm, and of course, the Virgin Queen. That title, the Virgin Queen, sounds noble. But in truth, who knows? Modern historians still debate it. One side believes Elizabeth truly never married, never had children, and remained celibate as a form of marriage to the throne, a strategic move to avoid being politically bound to any man. The other side is a bit more realistic. No one holds power for 45 years without knowing how to use affection as a tool. They point to her ambiguous relationship with Robert Dudley, her jealousy toward his wife, and records of her locking her bedroom door when guards walked by. There's also that old rumor about a young male servant who was suddenly transferred. No evidence, of course, but in royal history, the less evidence there is, the more people wonder. And it doesn't stop there. Did you know? A conspiracy theory still lingers in folk historical circles. The body in the tomb at Westminster might not be Elizabeth's. Sounds a bit Sherlock. But this theory once prompted a group of scholars to request an exhumation in the 19th century. They argued, original records stated she was placed in an oak coffin, but when surveyed in the Victorian era, it was recorded as being lead. The tomb lacked full engravings like those of other monarchs, and strangely, the body was placed at an angle, not laid flat as tradition dictated. Authorities denied all requests to open the tomb. Of course they did, because imagine if the person buried there wasn't her? And you might be thinking, okay, so if not Elizabeth, then who? Well, that's the part no one wants to dig into. Kind of like seeing a scene message at 2 a.m. and no reply. You know there are some secrets better left undisturbed. Whoever lies beneath that marble slab, above ground, the story was already complete. And the best storyteller of all wasn't Elizabeth, but those who outlived her. You thought the story ended when the coffin was lowered, the tomb sealed in stone, and the courtiers in black lined up for farewell? Sure, you thought so. But Westminster at night isn't as quiet as people think. Especially along the West Corridor, the one connecting the chapel to Elizabeth's tomb. That corridor, for centuries, has been quietly known as the Queen's Walk. And because, you see, since 1604, just 1 year after Elizabeth's death, royal guards began reporting heavy, slow footsteps, dragging fabric, echoing in the dark at midnight. An old guard once wrote, "I heard the sound of silk brushing against the wall, but the corridor was empty. When I turned around, the air was colder. The scent, very strange, like lavender, long, wilted, and do you know what Elizabeth used as her fragrance? That's right, self-distilled lavender perfume, used to mask her body odor in her final years." The story spread so widely that, for a time, night guards were rotated every 2 months due to psychological pressure. Some refused to pass the corridor alone. Others claimed they saw a white figure standing still by the window with no reflection in the mirror. And you won't believe this, similar reports continued to surface well into the 20th century. Even in 1953, the year Queen Elizabeth II ascended the throne, there was an incident that caused a stir within Westminster Palace. A royal guard, after a night shift, abandoned his post without explanation and was found the next morning in the palace garden clutching a small wooden crucifix. He said nothing, not until he retired. When he finally shared, "I saw a woman wearing a crown, but her face had no features. Blank, like a melting wax mask." Creepy, right? If your eyes are still open by now, congratulations. You're braver than some royal guards. Of course, modern historians aren't too convinced. They claim these stories are the result of collective obsession, combined with ancient architecture, dim lighting, and echoing stone hallways, creating auditory illusions. They argue, a figure as powerful as Elizabeth doesn't need to haunt anyone to be remembered. But not everyone dismisses it. A paranormal research group once received permission to record audio and measure temperatures in the corridor at night. The results? The recorder picked up a faint, breath-like sound. The thermometer registered a sudden 6-degree drop near Elizabeth's tomb despite sealed doors and no drafts. You might chuckle and say, "Come on, that's fake, but I know you just pulled the blanket up a little tighter. Didn't you?" The truth is, maybe Elizabeth doesn't need to appear, but the idea of her is too strong to fade. During her 45-year reign, Elizabeth made herself a living symbol. No husband, no children, no dependents, only the throne and her will. And you know, sometimes a will that's strong leaves an echo even after the body has returned to dust. Another curious detail few notice. Right behind Elizabeth's tomb lies that of Queen Mary, her cousin, the one Elizabeth had executed. Two women who once fought for the same throne now rest in the same place. Some say it's the final reconciliation. Others call it silent punishment, so that Mary would forever hear Elizabeth's footsteps each night. And now you might understand why Westminster is never fully lit at night. Some walls are never fully dusted. Some mirrors are never looked into after 3 a.m. And some footsteps, though unseen, still cause nearby candles to flicker as if afraid. Think about it. Many queens have come after Elizabeth, but when you speak of the symbol of feminine strength, sovereignty, and patriotism, it's still Elizabeth I. And that's not just reverence, it's strategy. When Queen Victoria ruled in the 19th century during empire expansion, industrialization, and a male-dominated government, she was dubbed the Reborn Elizabeth. Hence, newspapers depicted her wearing silver armor like at the Battle of Armada, riding a white horse, sword raised, In reality, Victoria mostly stayed in the palace, disliked leaving the castle, and hated war. But you know, in history, truth matters less than the feeling an image gives. And Elizabeth's image was resilient, cold, brilliant, and undefeated. And so, whenever the nation faced turmoil, her shadow was dusted off and paraded again. During World War II, young Queen Elizabeth II was trained to shoot, fix engines, and speak in a deep, firm voice that closely echoed her ancestor, Elizabeth I. Documentaries were made, paintings hung, showing her standing amidst London's flames. Unshaken, a strong image for citizens to believe. If she's not afraid, neither should I be. Oh, sounds familiar? Like when you're drowning in deadlines and suddenly see your ex's profile pic still hasn't read your last message. And you think, well, I'm still alive. Oh, it doesn't solve your problems, but it keeps you balanced. That's the role Elizabeth's image has played for centuries, a political sedative, a little-known detail. In 1955, during a private meeting among royal advisors, a proposal was made to recreate Elizabeth's ceremonial attire for display on national holidays. They said, when the people see Elizabeth, they will see that England never bows. Even during diplomatic campaigns with the U.S. and Europe, some speakers compared the reigning queen to Elizabeth to emphasize, we once had a woman alone, without a husband, without a personal army who defeated the Armada. We don't need noise. We just need to endure. And as you can see, Elizabeth was being used as a message. No longer a person, but a symbol. A memory on display, colored, propped up whenever spirit was needed. Historians call this phenomenon Elizabethism, the act of turning a human being into a spiritual, political, and cultural ideal. Some embrace it. Others issue warnings. We are in love with an illusion. A woman once existed, she hurt, she erred, she was lonely, but now she's only a print on a poster. Some scholars point out Elizabeth was, in fact, once terrified. She nearly faced execution under her sister's reign, was suspected of treason, lost all trust in her council after betrayals from within, and many times cried alone at night. Something recorded by her closest lady-in-waiting, Catherine Ashley. But you know what? Those details aren't in documentaries. They don't get statues. They're not in textbooks, because they're too human. And this world, when trying to elevate someone to the altar of iconography, rarely likes someone too much like ourselves. So the Elizabeth we know today in public memory is no longer the woman who sat motionless in a dim room, eyes wide open for 3 sleepless nights, but the woman standing on the cliffs of Dover, hair whipping in the wind, lips pursed without fear. A woman who never cried, even though we know, somewhere in the palace's shadowy corners, there once was a crumpled handkerchief soaked with her tears. You know, the more statues they build of you after death, the fewer people remember how much pain you were in when you were alive. We've spoken much about image, legend, symbol, but now, come back with me to that room. The room where Elizabeth sat motionless for 4 days, not eating, not speaking, and barely breathing with her failing lungs. Because in the end, even a symbol only has one heart. And when that heart stops, what truly caused it to give out? Ancient records, especially those kept by royal physicians, give no clear cause for Elizabeth's death. Instead, they use words that feel vague, exhaustion, and frailty, and withdrew quietly from life like a leaf falling from a branch. And, yes, it sounds poetic, but you and I both know no one dies poetically. And behind every quiet death are signs that had long been smoldering. One of the most common theories is that Elizabeth died from acute sepsis, possibly originating from untreated pneumonia or an internal abscess in the mouth, because at that time, she had almost no teeth, swollen gums, and signs of high fever and delirium. According to her closest attendants, just imagine, someone who could no longer chew, refused physicians, took no medicine, and lived in the damp spring of London bacteria, needed only a small chance. And here's a critical point. Elizabeth refused an autopsy, though she died after a prolonged illness. The palace by order was not to perform any post-mortem. No specific illness was to be recorded, and no doctor was allowed to release a report. Why? Because the court didn't want her death to be associated with weakness. Number 4. If the strongest ruler in England's history died from a dental infection, what would happen to the myth? Another theory, stranger, yet grounded, is that Elizabeth died of mercury poisoning. You remember Venetian ceruse, right? That white cosmetic powder made with lead and mercury, which Elizabeth used daily to cover her smallpox scars. Yes, it made her skin white, but it also seeped into her bloodstream, destroying her kidneys, liver, and nervous system. Symptoms like hair loss, delirium, muscle weakness, days of insomnia, coughing up blood, all matched her condition in those final months. And think about it, if every day you apply a layer of poison to your skin, then by old age, how much resistance does the body have left? There's also a gentler, yet sadder theory. She died of loneliness. Not the romantic kind, but biological loneliness when the immune system weakens due to prolonged lack of emotional and physical connection, combined with the constant stress of ruling as queen for 45 years. No one left a mark on her life, so in the end, no one was there when she left it. Some modern historians, including medical professionals, have proposed the idea that Elizabeth may have suffered undiagnosed clinical depression for decades. Exhibited in self-isolation, refusal to sleep, loss of taste, detachment from reality, and speaking to the dead. And when the mind dies before the body, the rest is just waiting. Whatever the cause, one thing is certain, Elizabeth did not die thrashing in pain. She died the way she lived, controlling everything until the final breath. She didn't let anyone lift her to bed, didn't allow anyone to touch her face, didn't summon doctors, didn't cry out. She simply sat and then quietly fell. A very Elizabeth way to go. You know, if one day you're tired of having to be strong all the time, remember, even the Queen got tired. And if Elizabeth could say something to you now, it probably wouldn't be about thrones, England, or victories. It might just be, don't try to be strong for too long, because no one will be there to see how much you endured. The world remembers her as an undefeated queen, but few remember she was once an unacknowledged child. Yes, before she was Elizabeth I, before the golden gowns, before the English throne, she was just Elizabeth Tudor, a little girl quietly pushed aside by the court, as if her name was something everyone tried to forget. Can you believe there was a time she wasn't even called a princess? Just Lady Elizabeth. A faded title. No claim to the throne. No royal etiquette lesson. No one saying, one day you'll be queen. Because, honestly, No one thought she'd survive to adulthood. Imagine her circumstances. Daughter of Henry VIII, a man infamous for his temper. Changing wives like changing shirts. Daughter of Anne Boleyn, the woman who threw the entire English church into chaos because the king wanted to marry her at all costs. But then Anne was beheaded when Elizabeth was just 3. The reason? Countless adultery, treason, betrayal, or simply, the king grew bored. And just like that, Elizabeth went from princess to the daughter of a traitor. Her mother executed, her title removed from royal documents, her private rooms reclaimed, servant dismissed. And from then on, no one was allowed to mention her mother's name. There's a touching account from a caretaker. Lady Elizabeth never asked where her mother was, but each night, she sat by the window, staring toward the Tower of London. 8. Picture that, a 3-year-old child who had lost her mother, lost her status, living among people too, afraid to show compassion for fear of punishment. From then on, she became a shadow in the very palace she was born in. As she grew, Elizabeth didn't enjoy the privileges other royal sons had, but she had something rare: intellect and observation. She studied Latin, Greek, French, Italian, read history, philosophy, mathematics, things girls weren't allowed to learn because they're not useful for marriage. And she learned the most important lesson: silence is the only weapon a woman has to survive the court. Truly, throughout her childhood and youth, she witnessed stepmothers one by one being deposed, executed, disappearing. Her half-brother Edward VI becoming king when she was only 13. Her half-sister Mary, the first taking the throne afterward, beginning a notorious Catholic purge that burned hundreds of Protestants alive. And Elizabeth, caught between Catholicism and Reform, remained silent. No statements, no sides taken, no objections, just reading, writing, living quietly like a flame that never dared to flare. But that silence saved her life at least 3 times. Once, suspected of plotting rebellion, she was arrested and held in the Tower of London, the same place her mother was executed. She wrote a 500-word letter, her hand trembling, defending herself. Each word a plea for her life. In the end, there was no evidence and she was released. But from that point on, she was no longer just a girl. She understood. If she wanted to survive, if she wanted to one day ascend the throne, she had to play the game to the end, and play it better than every man around her. And then, when Mary died, Elizabeth, 25 years old, unmarried, childless, with no clear political backing, was suddenly called to the throne. Some said it was a miracle. Some called it God's will. Enter it. But Elizabeth didn't believe in fate. She simply said, "I know I was born to do this. People just forgot about me." Oh, you see, a woman who was once not recognized as legitimate, once imprisoned, who lived under the shadow of countless queens and princesses, ended up becoming the longest reigning monarch of her time and the first queen to be buried in Westminster Abbey as a living saint. So next time you feel overlooked, dismissed, or pushed to the bottom of the list, remember, there was once a little girl curled up by a window, forgotten by an entire court, and one day, the entire country bowed before her throne. Do you know the first thing Elizabeth did when she became queen? It wasn't choosing her coronation gown, it was choosing how to answer the bishops. Because just hours after she was declared queen, religious representatives came rushing in each side, hoping she would join them. And, on one side, Roman Catholicism, ancient, wealthy, powerful. On the other, Protestantism, reformed, rising, energetic. And Elizabeth, standing in the middle, with a smile that was deeply political. She looked at both sides and answered with a now iconic line, "I do not want to make windows into men's souls." Yes. That was her way of saying, I know what I believe, but I won't let you pin me down. Clever, right? Because you see, England at the time wasn't simply about this religion or that. It was Catholicism backed by European powers like Spain and France, Protestantism gaining support among the people, especially the intellectuals and merchants. If Elizabeth chose one, she'd lose the other. If she tried to hover in between, she might lose both. So what did she do? She deployed a strategy never before seen in England. Religious politics by calculated ambiguity. Specifically, she kept Catholic rituals and ceremonies, candles, vestments, altars, crucifixes, but made herself, not the Pope, the head of the Church of England. She allowed the Bible to be read in English, so commoners could understand, but banned Protestant preachers from being too aggressive to avoid offending Catholics. The result? No one was entirely satisfied, but no one was angry enough to rebel. A policy, soft as velvet drapes in Elizabeth's chamber, not thick enough to block out the light, but heavy enough not to flutter in the wind. The Catholics didn't like her, but couldn't call her a heretic. The Protestants felt she hadn't reformed enough, but admitted no one had protected them better. And you know what? That very ambiguity is what allowed her to survive. A curious story. Once, a radical Protestant bishop preached that women should not lead according to Scripture. Elizabeth didn't get angry, didn't imprison him. She simply smiled and said, "I am not much of a theologian, but if I were not God's will, surely he would have sent someone to stop me by now." Yes, a response both divine and purely royal. Many scholars call it the Elizabethan religious settlement, not a reconciliation, but a way of managing tension. She didn't seek consensus. She accepted disagreement, as long as everyone stayed in line. And did you notice? She never married. She never had children. She never shared power with any pope, archbishop, or king consort, because she knew a single misstep and the fragile peace between two faiths would explode like a barrel of gunpowder. And throughout her 45-year reign, despite plots, assassinations, and even rebellions, she managed to keep England from descending into religious civil war like many other nations. So what religion did she follow? The real answer is, she followed the religion of Elizabeth, a private faith, with silence as its ritual, observation as its doctrine, and the belief that everything is negotiable as long as power is maintained. If that sounds pragmatic to you, then yes. To survive as a queen into old age, you can't live like a poet. She chose not to wage war, but never let anyone pull her down. And you know, in an age when women were taught to obey their husbands, serve their fathers, listen to their priests, Elizabeth made the world listen to her, without ever raising her voice. There was one question people asked Elizabeth more than any other during her 45-year reign. Not, "Will your majesty go to war with Spain?" Not, "Do you need more funds for the navy?" But, "When will your majesty marry?" And Elizabeth, with a smile no one could fully read, always answered in ways that made people stop asking. Sometimes she said, "I am already married to England." And other times, if I marry a man, I must obey him. And obedience does not suit me. And occasionally, she would simply smile and glide past the question as if someone had asked, "Will it rain today?" Think about it. A woman ruling an entire kingdom, surrounded by European princes, ambassadors, noblemen, diplomats, all wanting to propose. Some negotiations lasted years just to discuss whether the queen might be open to marriage. And she, with her peacock fan, dragon-embroidered gowns, and eyes that understood more than any of the men pleading with her, always knew exactly what she was doing. Because in Elizabeth's world, marriage was never about love. It was alliance. It was power. It was surrender. It was signing away your personal freedom. And Elizabeth refused to sign. She once said, "I know too well the fate of women who marry poorly. I was born from a bloody union, and I was raised in the shadow of queens who were betrayed, bound, and beheaded for trusting men." 8. No need to look far. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, was beheaded after just 3 years as queen. Her stepmother, Catherine Howard, also executed for unfaithfulness. 8. Her sister Mary I married the King of Spain, then died alone. In suspicion and despair, you might ask, with all this, who could still believe in love? Instead of marrying, Elizabeth chose to love within the limits of her own design. She had Robert Dudley, her childhood companion, rumored to be her lifelong lover. She had young courtiers, Francis Drake, Walter Raleigh, men she favored, trusted, praised, but never bound herself to. Once, when asked why she didn't marry Robert Dudley, she simply said, "If I marry him, I will lose him." Oh, sounds like something someone on Tinder in 2025 might say, right? The truth is, Elizabeth didn't trust anyone enough to give away both the crown and her heart at the same time. And perhaps she was afraid. Not afraid of love, but afraid of being consumed by it. Because in her world, love always came with a cost paid in blood. And so, for 45 years, she remained alone. On paper, in title, on the throne, though she was constantly pursued, admired, and invited, no one ever truly entered her inner world. Was she lonely? Undoubtedly, perhaps even lonelier than most imagine. A ruler of a nation, with no children, no husband, no one to call her mother or wife, no matter how much power she had. She was still just a large shadow in an empty room. But you know what? That very choice to remain unmarried saved her. It kept the throne hers for nearly half a century. It made her the only queen of that era who wasn't deposed, assassinated, or controlled. And when she died, no one remembered Elizabeth as someone's wife. And they remembered her as the one woman who made all of Europe tread lightly. Not because of who stood behind her, but because no one could stand beside her. Have you ever heard of battles that changed all of Europe? If not, let me tell you about one. Not a bloodbath like an epic war film, but one that forced the world to look again. The battle against the Spanish Armada, the invincible fleet of Spain. Yes, Elizabeth wasn't just the queen in silk gowns, speaking softly, skillfully balancing religion. She was also the leader of England. At the very moment, a massive fleet prepared to erase her tiny island nation. Picture the scene. In 1588, Spain under King Philip II dispatched a fleet of more than 130 ships, carrying over 30,000 troops and heavy artillery, heading straight for the English Channel. The goal? Land troops in England. Overthrow Elizabeth. restore Catholicism, and place the English throne in the hands of a more agreeable king. All of Europe held its breath. Everyone believed England would fall. Spain had more ships, bigger cannon, more soldiers, and the belief that God was on their side. Duace and Elizabeth, no modern warships, no dominant navy, no significant alliances, just the trust of her people and a brilliant political instinct. While her generals argued over whether to defend London first or intercept at the coast, Elizabeth rode into the camp in armor, on horseback, speaking to her soldiers as though she were born to wield a sword, not a scepter. You remember her legendary words, don't you? I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too. Yes. In that moment, people didn't just see a queen. They saw a massive spirit inside a small body, stirring courage in a nation trembling before the storm at sea. And you know what? The storm did come, but not from Spain, from the sky. Just as the Armada prepared to land, a massive storm swept unexpectedly through the channel, scattering the Spanish fleet. Ships ran aground, masts snapped, dozens were driven onto the shores of Scotland, Ireland, or disappeared beneath the waves. The Spaniards called it La Tormenta Inglesa, the wrath of the English. The English, with a quiet smirk, said, God is an Englishman. Hemmed it. Of course, it wasn't just the weather. The English Navy, under Francis Drake, used new tactics: small, fast ships, long-range cannons, guerrilla warfare at sea, and one ingenious move: fireships vessels filled with gunpowder, set ablaze and sent into the Armada's formation. The result? Spanish ships panicked, collided, and broke formation themselves. By the end, more than half the Armada was destroyed. The rest limped home to Spain, exhausted, torn, and broken. And England? Not an inch lost. Not a queen dethroned. And most importantly, not a shred of faith surrendered. For Elizabeth, this victory wasn't just military, it was destiny-defying. She once deemed illegitimate, unworthy of the crown, without husband, without heir, without army, had defeated the world's greatest empire, with nothing but will, a speech, and a belief that I do not need to be a man to show strength. If you're still listening now, eyes half closed, heart just a little lighter, remember, strength isn't in muscle or weapons. It's in how you stay calm in the storm, and in how you make the world look up even when you stand alone. And then, Elizabeth passed. No drums, no trumpets, no final words carved for the ages. Just a last breath, fading into the velvet curtains of a cold palace room. No one knows what she was thinking. No one heard her last whisper. Only flickering candles and a foggy morning where the news drifted through sleeping London like mist. The Queen is dead. Long live the memory. They buried her in Westminster Abbey, beside Mary the sister. The rival? The ghost she had outlived to become herself. And thus, Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, ended a life with no children, but gave birth to an era, an age of light, art, Shakespearean theater, global voyages, and most remarkably, an age shaped by a woman who didn't need a man to prove her worth. You see, her whole life was a paradox. Born in doubt, died in glory, once denied the title of princess, later called the Queen of an Age by all of Europe. lost her mother to political violence, yet built the most stable reign in nearly a century. And she did it all alone. No king, no prince, no puppeteer behind the curtain, just a feathered fan. Up in, eyes too sharp to meet for long, and a heart that knew when to stay silent and when to make the world listen. If you ask, what kind of person was Elizabeth? I think she wasn't perfect. She wasn't gentle. She wasn't tender or saintly as legend might suggest. She could be cold, sometimes cruel, often so lonely she whispered to the dead. But she chose to live true to herself, and in an age that demanded women bow their heads, that alone was the bravest thing she could do. So if you're hearing these words at 2 a.m., if you've ever felt out of place, not enough, not chosen, then remember, there once was a girl disowned by her father, orphaned by politics, locked in a freezing tower, and she became the woman the world writes books about, makes films about, casts in marble, not because anyone gave her permission, but because she gave herself permission not to disappear. Now, it's time for you to sleep. So your dreams tonight may carry you to some distant harbor in the 16th century, where a woman in crimson velvet, fan in hand, steps onto a tower balcony to gaze toward the ocean. No one knows what she's thinking, but the sun still rises, and the name Elizabeth still echoes in the wind, like something irreplaceable. Sleep well, and remember, you don't need to be a king to live like someone who deserves to be remembered forever. Good night.